Hello. How's everybody doing tonight? Woo! Welcome to SecKC October 2018 edition. We have a lot of good things for you tonight. Is everybody, first thing I want to start out with, for all you SecKC regulars, you may notice that I am not a jurist. He couldn't be here tonight for the best reasons. He's actually busy preparing to welcome the newest SecKC member into the world. We're all really excited. Yes. Unfortunately, that means we have me for tonight. I'm going to try my best to fill in. So to get us started, you guys ready for some great talks? Maybe have a few drinks, meet some people, and let's not forget we get to be treated to the soothing sounds of Johnny Five on the tables tonight. You may not know, but October is Johnny Five's birthday month. So let's make sure we show him some love tonight. And I want to start that off by singing to him. Everybody want to sing with me? If yes, great, fill in. If not, get out. I'm just kidding. Okay. All right, let's go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Johnny. Happy birthday to you. All right. Yeah. All right, we have some great stuff for you tonight. We got a couple of great talks. First off, we have Julie's going to run us through 101. Then we will have a quick news briefing followed by a short break. And then we'll have our first talk of the night starting, I believe, at 6:45. Kevin's going to talk to us about zero-day disclosures and some of the things that are going around with that. So, without further ado, here's Julie.
Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Julie, and I would like to ask, first of all, do we have any first-time attendees tonight here? Woo! Great! Every time I do this, there's new people, and it's so exciting. Anyway, welcome to SecKC. This is the largest monthly InfoSec meetup in the world. That's something to be pretty proud of. It is ultra dark out there. I can't see anybody. This is the second Tuesday of every month. Kansas Hall, Overland Park. We do it every month except for maybe August sometimes when everybody's over from DEF CON, and December when everybody's too busy. Things you should know about SecKC. We've been doing this for 7 years, and it just keeps getting better because people keep coming back, and they keep bringing new folks. So if you're new, make sure you get around and talk to people. Nobody fights that I know of, and if they do, I'm pretty sure none of us have rabies. So get out there and learn from somebody else. So the meetings are unrated. You're probably going to hear an F-bomb or two, and I'm confident that I will not make it through the things I have to do tonight without making at least one fart joke. So even more. SecKC happens because of volunteers and sponsors. Everybody turn around and say thank you to Gigamon for sponsoring us tonight. Yay, Gigamon! Thank you. SecKC also happens because people use Eventbrite, not because we want to send your names to 3-letter agencies, but because we want to buy you pizza. So you need to RSVP so that we can get accurate head counts so that everybody gets fed. Make sure you RSVP to Eventbrite. Everyone is approachable here. We have a lot of different people from a lot of different verticals, a lot of different industries, and we're all nice people, even me. So approach somebody new, learn something while you're here. We have a code of conduct. You can read it at seckc.org/about. Lines out what our expectations are. It's really not that hard, as long as you're not a jerk. Look for people in the lit lanyards, that's what that's called, and a yellow badge. So anybody with a lit lanyard and a yellow badge can help you out if you run into an issue here, something makes you uncomfortable, someone makes you uncomfortable. Reach out to one of us. Teach and learn from each other and challenge ideas, not people. If I think Archwist is wrong about something, I'm not going to call him an a-hole. I'm going to tell him, hey, that thing you said, I disagree with it. So just make sure you're not taking things personally and you're not making things personal. We have a Slack channel. How many of you here did not know before tonight that we had a Slack channel? Well, you should go join it. How many of you are here but have never joined the Slack channel or haven't been on for a while? Get with the program. Come on, join our Slack channel. Yeah. So I know of at least one person here who is looking for someone to give a job tonight. So you can either join the SecKC job posting Slack channel, or we're going to send you back behind the STFU wall to talk to her about it. Be the change you wish to see. If we're doing something you don't like, or we're not doing something that you wish we were doing, hop on Slack, propose it. Go in the general channel or the random channel, talk about it, find somebody who's been here a while and say, hey, I want to do a thing. And we'll talk through the process of doing the thing with you. Destroy no data, maintain no persistence, above all, do no harm, but we do encourage shenanigans. Just, keep it on the light side. So, I mentioned the STFU wall before. There's a real social element to SecKC. I go here to catch up with people I like, but I want everybody to stop for a second and turn around and look at that wooden wall that says Boulevard Brewing Company on it. That is the shut the fuck up wall. If you're going to have a conversation and you're not going to listen to the talk, you need to take it behind there, because the acoustics of this room mean that if you're running off the mouth in this area, nobody can hear what the person up here is talking about. So, conversations, STFU wall. We do have law enforcement who occasionally attend. If you're talking about your carding operation or your botnet or this new ransomware you're working on, probably this is not the place to do it out loud. If you're going to tweet about us on social media, SecKC is the proper sharing Octothorpe, or hashtag if you're a normal person. And you can also now follow us at twitter.com/SecKC, now new and improved with less underscore. The old one still works. Things you should know about SecKC. You need help getting to a conference. Are all your friends going to Hacker Summer Camp and you can't make it? Do you feel like if you stay in your job one more month, you'll burn the place to the ground? Also not something you want to discuss around law enforcement. You should talk to SecDSM. They've got some neat scholarship programs and some recruiting things going on that they're just generally a bunch of good people. So talk to them. The SecKC suggestion box, is it here tonight? Well, it's someplace. We'll put it out. If you want to make an anonymous suggestion, you don't want to do it in email, you don't want to do it on Slack, we have a little ammo can that you can put your suggestion in. Awesome. In January 2018, this is an old deck, someone suggested that we should bring in strippers. So there's one. There's the other one. Woo!
Take it all.
Yes. So, the schedule. This has nothing to do with reality, but at 6:45, a talk is going to happen, and then about a half an hour or 45 minutes later, another talk will happen. But a few things came off the rails with one of mine tonight. So, God, I'm skipping that. SecKC. Here we go.
Hey, one last thing I want to mention is, remember, we have our sponsor here tonight. Gigamon is here. They do network visibility stuff. If you are so inclined, go have a chat with them. They, sponsors for the month, provide the free pizza that we have. So go give them a talk if you want. Thanks.
Woo!
up, everyone? Woo! Yeah, that's a response I like. All right, so we're going to do news, little head-to-head this month. Those of you that don't know me, I'm Aaron Scanlon. I work for the University of Missouri. This is, have you turned your mic on?
I have.
Oh, perfect.
For gay grad, that's pretty good. And I'm Julie Fugit. I work at the University of Kansas. So this is the SecKC News Border War Edition. Sports ball.
Yeah, those sports. Yeah. All right, so if you've never been, what we do up here is we do this. I can't even remember what the format is called anymore, but it's 15 seconds a slide. Ignite. Thank you, whoever yelled that out. These lights are blinding. I don't know who the hell you were, but I will buy you a beer. Yeah, we got 15 seconds a slide. Usually we can't get through our notes. There's swearing. It's a lot of fun. Now, before I get started, actually, I'm sorry, I did have one thing to say. Sarah, will you raise your hand and wave around? Okay, so Sarah was one of the people aforementioned earlier who has a job posting to talk to you about with Dickinson Financial. If you want to talk to her, where do we go? Shut the fuck up wall. She's going to be hanging out back there for a little bit, so go holler at her if you want to get some deets on that. And I'm sure that she'll post that in the job postings channel later on, and you can catch her later too if you miss her back there. So without further ado, let's get on with the news. See, I told you, presenter notes showed up right the first time. Oh, they can see that shit. I know how to computer.
They have those over there?
Yeah, when I do my job, I guess. All right, so in theory, this slide, there we go.
All right, Exploitus. Exploit tools, script search engine. If you're a red teamer, a blue teamer, a skitty, a noob, you need to check this out. Looks like there's a lot of stuff available. The guy that invented it or wrote it is on Twitter as I.
Get off the microphone, all right. So you guys might have heard about this funny little thing called a hurricane. It's a lot like a tornado, but it's made of water, which is fucking terrifying for a server admin. If they didn't have a disaster recovery plan in place, sucks to be them. Been a lot of rain here though too.
My turn. Pretty hacks. Crash an iOS device or reboot it with a CSS, because why the hell not? Send it to your favorite or least favorite iOS user.
Yeah, you got some free time there, girl.
Well, yeah, there you go.
Freestyle, all right. So you might think that your new keyless entry car is super cool. You might think that it's really awesome that you can start it without having to turn a key or anything like that. But your bougie ass is in trouble, as it turns out that there is an issue with the passive keyless entry system.
Hey, whiteboards are the new information boards at the airport. Bristol Airport had a ransomware attack, and they did not pay the ransom, and it wasn't targeted at them. It was just, hey, we didn't patch our shit, and this happened. So they had to take all their systems offline as a precautionary measure.
You might be familiar with this little piece of software called CCleaner. It used to be awesome, but lately it fucking sucks. Part of the reason why is because the authors started not respecting your settings and resetting them whenever you update, even if you chose not to update.
Mage cart. I know nobody in here probably shops at Newegg, so you can ignore this one. But if you shop at Newegg between August 14th and 19th, you should probably go get some new credit cards, because they inserted skimmer code into the payment processing page.
So NSO Group is a bag of shitheads that make malware and sell that malware to people that don't have scruples. The Citizen Lab, made a really cool report on their analysis of the use of one of those pieces of malware.
GovPay Now has leaked more than 14 million customer records dating back more than 6 years, including name, address, phone number, and today ends in Y. No breach.
Because government website. All right, so snitches usually get stitches, allegedly, but apparently, if you operate the Mirai botnet and you roll over on enough big names, you get absolutely nothing. Kind of a mixed bag. I don't know how I feel about that. They still ought to get in trouble if you ask me, but hey, they brought down some others.
We're doing the wrong slides, by the way. Remember that time that Yahoo had every single account get compromised?
All right, hold on. Let's switch it up. Sorry, I took over her slides. Hey, guess what? Yahoo lost all their stuff. That's how much your data was worth. Fuck Yahoo!
Hey, NCIX forgot the 3Ds, D-band, destroyed, Gauss. There's a give them the D joke in the server, but I didn't think enough to make it. The data broker sold off all systems without wiping any of them first. Naturally, they weren't encrypted, because who the hell does that? And yeah, you're gonna get doxxed.
I was wondering why all these notes were so good for the shit that I was talking about. Troy Hunt made a really interesting post on shaming organizations to make them change shit. Read it, it's good. maybe we should do it to users? Question mark?
Sentient Mustache John Bolton says the Department of Defense is going to go on the offensive and hack all the things. They fire their cybersecurity coordinator because who gives a shit? We're just going to all come up with our own cyber strategies. That's like 2 shots and do whatever we want.
Patrick Wardale coming in with yet another great security find. Apple coming in with yet another example of how fucked up their dev and QA process apparently is at this point. This exploit involved letting a malicious, unprivileged app be able to copy files from the system that it shouldn't.
Cloudflare nerded out for their birthday and fixed server name indication, which I had to look up how it works. But basically, if you have a shared IP address among many HTTP websites, it leaks a lot of information, and they fixed it. Hooray, Cloudflare!
Who is this? Cyber Threat Alliance released a report regarding the state of illicit crypto mining, so non-consensual crypto mining, cryptojacking, things of that nature. A shocking 400% plus increase from 2017. It is the new hotness.
Ordinarily, I regard Reddit as a dumpster fire of sexism and awfulness, but in this case, the sysadmin subreddit really came through with a mega dump of tools, quotes, tips, podcasts, tutorials, website books, cheat sheets, you name it. It's not just for newbies, it's for experienced folks as well.
We've got a GitHub project. I like to show you all GitHub projects so you guys can leave here and actually play with some shit. This one's called Vibe. By the way, when you Google things to find your images for your slides, don't Google Vibe. This is a post-exploitation framework.
So UFEI rootkits, which are everybody's favorite kind of rootkit, right? Can't be new. It won't. You okay? Nuke and Pave won't fix it. Nor will an entire hard drive replacement. You got to do a firmware flash to remove it. It's APTA 28 Fancy Bear, and I'm sure they just wanted to.
Hey, anybody applied to the UN here in the past? Yeah, keep raising your hand. So, governments, again, not even all of the world's governments put together can fucking run a WordPress site correctly, apparently. All resumes submitted within the last many years.
Shout out to the .edus, woo! University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor have released a tool that allows you to see if detect the presence of an eavesdropper on a wireless network. So, yay, EDUs!
So you might recall VPN filters being the piece of malware where the FBI instructed everyone to reset their router. It had a persistence mechanism, mind you, but anyway, latest iteration turns out it has yet more modules, and so it's still a threat.
2018 is the year of the supply chain attack, both real and alleged. We'll get to that a little bit, but basically, good luck defending against these kinds of things if you're not a nation state. All your GitHubs are hacked.
Yeah. All right, so the good news, at least with Uber, is that your data is worth that much, according to that court of law. Again, fuck Uber, fuck the laws regarding data breaches. Everyone in this room gets screwed, not them.
If you got a friend request from me, it was fake. No, really, this was a token reuse exploit. It leveraged the view as function in Facebook, which as far as I can tell has disappeared temporarily, and it allowed attackers to steal 50 million or thereabouts session tokens. So, this is making Noah's life difficult.
The Port of San Diego suffered a ransomware attack. Now, there's nothing super interesting about the specific attack. What is interesting, and this is the third national or the third worldwide port that has been ransomware in the past 3 months.
Everything is terrible and nothing matters. The DEF CON 26 Voting Village report is out. The vendor response seems to be deny, 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 then lawyer up, and then sue kids, I guess. That fixes everything.
So there's this cafe at Chicago University where you don't actually pay with money, you give them information, like your email address, what you're majoring in, so you get targeted ads. I feel like I should be more angry about this, but they already have that.
So, Face ID, apparently law enforcement is tricking people into using their faces to open their phones. Yes, the common advice is use a code, don't use biometrics. You're going to jail, right? Until you remember your password, you're going to jail.
Just a reminder for anyone that might still be using a certificate with a semantic root, those are going to be distrusted by every major browser in the next few days. So, good news for you, all your IE8 users are going to be fine, but...
Intel is apparently in the habit of leaving their chipsets in manufacturing mode, which, as we know, there are no issues with going around with your stuff in debug mode all the time. Nothing bad can happen. Bonus points because the documentation for it's really sparse.
So, Recipe Unlimited, which you've probably never heard of because it's probably some shadowy, overarching company. It runs a bunch of restaurants, though. Apparently, suffered a breach so bad that notes like this were being left at some locations, like literally full chains closing.
If you're into kernel dev or kernel exploitation, this is a really great step-by-step walkthrough of how Linux kernel exploit works. If you want to read it, knock yourself out. I probably won't.
It is super awesome. Everyone knows the kernel is complex. Go read it. Got Krebs here talking about phishing attacks being on the rise. Latest one that we've seen at the University of Missouri is a Chinese voicemail talking about their immigration status, preying on both fears for current presidential administration and the fact,
We're getting those too at KU. So, Fin7 arrests. Oh, partners are getting arrested, you guys. They're really worried about Joker's stash ability to continue doing business, to which I say, those guys.
I got the super microwave. Long story short, there's this big old he said, she said battle going on. Bloomberg says, bunch of bad shit's happening with super micro. All the other groups are saying, nah, no way. Nobody knows. It's interesting, and it's all plausible, and if you don't think so, then fuck you.
R.I.P. their stock price, either way. So, war is peace, freedom is slavery, and the Israelis are selling the Saudis malware. The Saudi government used the Pegasus malware to target a dissident living in Canada. They don't take kindly to people.
Turns out that phishing organizations is pretty easy. The hard part is using the credentials that you phish without fucking up. Some people are capitalizing on that, and apparently some gullible sons of bitches are actually buying these credentials. That's the easy part.
If you didn't go to DerbyCon, the videos are up on Iron Geek's site.
Yay!
They're great videos. Trying to help you. I feel bad. I actually stole like half of your fucking slides.
It's okay.
It's all part of my plan. That is the news.
working on it. They're modified windows. I still love it. Still and then we have everything up there. And then the audio too. All the videos up there. Gary, do you like videos?
gentleman here is going to talk to us about zero-day disclosures and some of the research that's going around that. So buckle up and let's have a good time. Thanks. Woo!
All right, hey, here we go. All right, so I'm here to talk about something that I call the big security short. My name's Kevin. I work at a company here that probably no one's heard of in town, pretty new in town, a company called Cerner. I've been there for a couple years, and anyway, enough about me. So I really liked this quote from, of all places, McAfee, which I'm not like too thrilled about, but I thought it was actually pretty nice, which is, cybercrime is a growth industry, the returns are great and the risks are low. And I think this quote really embodies a lot of what my talk is about tonight. So first I want to take you back in this story, back to Thursday, August 25th, 2016, in San Francisco, California, and this is our 0 day. And on this day, a firm called Muddy Waters Capital released a big report. And this report was regarding a company called St. Jude Medical, which is a medical device manufacturer. And this report basically laid out why Muddy Waters was taking a short position on St. Jude Medical. And in this report, the very first sentence, it says, there's a strong possibility that close to half of St. Jude Medical's revenue is about to disappear for approximately 2 years. Further on in the report, it says that their pacemakers, ICDs, CRTs might, in our view, should be recalled and remediated. We find their vulnerabilities orders of magnitude more worrying than the medical device hacks that have been publicly discussed in the past. So here you have a venture capital firm that just drops this report out of the blue, just completely tearing apart this medical device company. The market immediately reacted, so the stock went down. This is a publicly traded company. Their stock went down 8%. They ended up closing the day at down just 5%. But the media and security community just went into a frenzy. So nothing like this had ever happened before, where a venture capital firm comes out and publicly just blasts a company, in this case a medical device manufacturer, and says that their security vulnerabilities are so bad that the company is going to lose half their revenue over the next 2 years. Now, before I continue on with this story, I want to go back actually 2 years earlier, because it's relevant to our story today. And so let's go back to April of 2014, and this section is all about the troll. Now, for those who aren't aware, this is Weave. You don't need to look this guy up if you don't are aware of him. You basically just need to remember that he's a notorious troll, an asshole, and a pretty bad racist. He went to prison, actually was, I think, shouldn't have probably gone to prison for what he did ultimately get convicted for, but he was released on a technicality, and when he was released, a week later, he goes out to the media and announces that he's forming a new company called TRO LLC, or Troll, and he announces that this company is a crowd-funded hedge fund short seller. And so his business plan was to get money from all of us, purchase zero-day vulnerabilities with that money, then short the stock of the company that was susceptible to the zero-day vulnerability, and then profit. Now, his crowdfunding goal wasn't successful. He had a $54,000 goal. He only ended up making just a hair over $1,200. Perhaps he wasn't serious, and perhaps he was just trolling everybody with this Troll LLC. But it was a very interesting plan that he had, and one that had not been articulated before. And it got a lot of attention in the press, not only because of who Weave was, but also what were the legalities of a company who was very upfront about they would publish their zero-day vulnerabilities, short the stock, publicize the vulnerability, and then make a profit. So this company never happened. Of course, the crowdfunding goal wasn't met. Maybe this whole thing was just a troll on everyone, but it was interesting nonetheless. So I've talked a bit about short selling, and for those that aren't aware, I want to kind of go over a bit what short selling is, because it's important for the rest of our story here. So in a short selling scenario, imagine we've got our Alice, Bob, and Charlie, and in this case, Alice is going to lend one share of her Acme stock to Bob, all right? And let's imagine that the price of this stock right now is $100 a share. So Alice lends her one share of stock to Bob. Bob is going to turn around and take that lent share from Alice and immediately sell it to Charlie for the market value, which is $100. Now imagine that this price of Acme stock goes down to $50 a share, so it loses half its value. At this point, Bob is going to buy a single share of stock back from Charlie again here at market value, which is now $50. And then he can give that lent share back to Alice. And so what's happened here in this profit scenario is that Bob has just made $50, okay? Now, short selling isn't always guaranteed to make money. And in the opposite scenario, this is the loss scenario, when Bob takes that lent stock and sells it for market value at $100, let's say the stock actually goes up in price, and so it goes up to $150. Well, Bob needs to give that lent share back to Alice, and so he's forced to now buy it back at market value at $150, gives the lent share back to Alice, and now Bob has had a $50 loss. Okay, so short selling definitely has some risks. But if you're fairly confident that the stock is going to decrease in price, then you can short sell the stock and make a profit. All right, so now that we understand short selling, we understand now what the Weaves Troll LLC was intending to do, and we know that Muddy Waters, that venture firm, disclosed a zero-day vulnerability against, or at least disclosed the fact that they thought that the security vulnerabilities in that St. Jude Medical were going to cause the stock price to go down. Let's talk a bit about disclosure. So there are three, I've broken down disclosure into three types. So the first is no disclosure. So this is where the researchers don't disclose any vulnerabilities that they find with the vendor that is affected by the vulnerabilities or the public. So they basically keep the vulnerabilities to themselves. Now, this is often used in cases of like nation states or APTs or other organized crime that want to exploit the vulnerability for their own monetary gain. So they don't want to disclose it because they want to continue reaping the benefits from that vulnerability. So things like the Gray Shift company that has the iOS passcode exploit, that's their Gray Key device that they sell to law enforcement or maybe other countries. That's a vulnerability that they haven't disclosed because they can make money off of selling their devices. We had the NSA zero-day exploits that was later exposed by the Shadow Brokers group. That was obviously used for whatever the NSA does. And then you've got ATM exploits that have come up in the news in the last several months. That is speculated that there's some sort of organized crime group behind that was taking advantage of vulnerabilities in the ATM network to siphon off money for their gain. Now, the other type of disclosure, this one is probably most people are more familiar with, is what we now refer to as coordinated disclosure. And this is where the researcher who finds a vulnerability coordinates with the vendor that's affected by the vulnerability to either publicly disclose it at some point in time, or they actually may coordinate to not disclose it at all. All right. So in the case where the two parties decide not to disclose it, that's often like in a private bug bounty program where the researcher is paid by either the vendor directly or a management company to find vulnerabilities, disclose them to the vendor, and then they are bound by some NDA or something where they can't release or disclose the vulnerability. More often than not, you see things like Google's Project Zero that has a very public 90-day coordinated disclosure policy where the Project Zero team at Google will disclose privately the vulnerability to the affected vendor, and then they start a 90-day clock in which they will release all of their findings, and so the vendor then is motivated to get a vulnerability out within that 90 days. So this is what's, I'd say, the most common in public, and all the vulnerabilities that are discussed, or oftentimes most of the vulnerabilities discussed, like in the news section here, come from these coordinated disclosures. Now, on the other opposite end of the spectrum, we've got the full disclosure, and this is where the researcher discloses vulnerabilities that they find publicly without any coordination with vendors, and without any advance notice to the vendors. So they may have done a disclosure to media organizations with an embargo date to say that, okay, on this day you can release it, but oftentimes too they'll just drop it on 0 day, and then everyone scrambles and tries to learn about the vulnerability in question here. So in a full disclosure, it's going to have a very high media impact, and it also leaves users who may be affected by the vulnerability scrambling to determine if they're affected or how they're affected, what they can do to mitigate or to work around the vulnerability. And historically, we've seen full disclosure in the past before we had coordinated disclosure, and then also we've seen it where people will use full disclosure to force vendors to address issues, or full disclosure will happen after a breakdown of coordinated disclosure, where a researcher is working with a vendor and they're dragging their feet or trying to stretch things out, and so the researcher ends up going into a full disclosure mode where they disclose everything. In those cases, it's the researchers really aren't looking for a monetary gain here. They may be looking just to do something in the best interest of users because they don't feel like the vulnerability is taken seriously. So full disclosure has historically not been this negative thing where the researchers are trying to get financial gain from this. Really, the researchers who are trying to get financial gain from their vulnerabilities are more often doing the no disclosure or the coordinated disclosures with like a private bug bounty program. So we've got our short fund hedges where we're betting on a company's stock to go down. So we're betting the value of that company to go down. And we've got full disclosure. So if we combine these two things, we should have profit, right? Well, you might be asking yourselves, well, what about insider trading? Because this sounds like that the security researcher knows something that no one else knows. So they have some sort of insider knowledge and they're disclosing it. Shouldn't this be like illegal, right? There's got to be some weird legalities here. So it helps to actually look at what actually insider trading is. So insider trading is defined as, there's a big definition, but we can distill it down to basically any individual. So you don't have to work at the company that is in question here, but any individual that trades shares of the company on material non-public information. Notable cases here are Jeff Skilling, the former CEO of Enron. So he was actually convicted of insider trading, went to prison for that. So he had insider information about Enron. He knew that what they were doing was built upon lies and traded to the profit. Before the details of Enron, the bad stuff came out. Martha Stewart was accused of insider trading with the whole ImClone system. So this is a good example where Martha Stewart did not work at ImClone. She was an investor in ImClone. She got a tip from a friend who had insider information. And so the feds went after her. She actually was not convicted of insider trading. So while she was accused of it, she never got convicted of it. She got convicted on other stuff. But that is another case of, you can delve into insider trading even though you're not working at the actual company. So if you get this insider information that you know is to be insider information and you act upon that by trading, you're guilty of that. So it's, a zero-day vulnerability, a researcher finding zero-day vulnerabilities does not necessarily have insider information. And there's a fine line here, which I'll talk about in a second. But now that we've got this kind of background information and definition around short selling and insider trading out of the way, let's go back to where I started this story with that the Muddy Waters research and the St. Jude Medical. So that was, if you remember, in 2016. But let's go back 1 year before that, and let's talk about the researcher behind that report. So the researcher behind that report on St. Jude Medical is a company called MedSec Holdings, and they were established in 2015, and this is on their website. They declare themselves as the first and only cybersecurity research company formed exclusively to serve the healthcare industry. So they're very focused on the healthcare industry. And starting in 2015, they spent 18 months examining vulnerabilities in various medical devices. So they looked at the gamut across a bunch of different medical devices. and they spent a lot of time and a lot of research in that field. So certainly they know what they're talking about here. Now let's talk about the investor, Muddy Waters. So MedAppSec has done their research for the last 18 months, and now they approach an investor, Muddy Waters Research. So Muddy Waters Research was founded by this guy here, Carson Block. So he founded this research fund in 2010, and his entire purpose for forming this research fund was to examine companies, and specifically companies that he felt were going to decline in value significantly. And then he would short the stock, he would publicize his findings, and then he'd reap profits from this. And he wasn't just some no-name investor. So Carson Block is actually very well known in the short selling community, and that's because his firm Muddy Waters Research has been very successful in publicizing and having largely taking down a bunch of companies. So the most famous one was the Sino-Forest company. This is a very big multinational corporation, and in 2011, Muddy Waters Research dropped a report that basically laid out how they felt like that SFC here was completely a fraud, and they were way overvalued, that a lot of their business was built upon fake numbers, and the stock immediately plummeted 82%. So much so that the trading was suspended for this stock. And of course the company denies that, they deny everything in the report. They said that, there was nothing, that there was a fraud about it. But they were forced in 2012 to file for bankruptcy. They ended up suing Muddy Waters and Carson Block. Of course, when a company like that, when that event happens and the stock plummets in value, then a lot of people are pissed. And so auditors were hired to go open up the books and take a look at what was going on. So 5 years later, after they filed for bankruptcy, the auditors released the report, and actually the separate auditors released a report. The original auditors that were associated with the company and the CEO ended up paying $155 million in settlements. And then in 2018, so just this year, they were hit with $2.63 billion in civil damages for their fraud. So as it turns out, Carson Block's research in this company was completely spot on, and the company is pretty much gone. And we don't know how much Muddy Waters made, but he obviously, I'm sure, made a ton of money shorting this stock. He's since gone on to do this with several other companies, but this was the most famous one and has had the most impact because the company really went under. The other companies he's gone after have certainly lost in value, but they have not gone under completely. So what, again, MedSec did, is MedSec approached Muddy Waters and said, we will license you the vulnerabilities that we found in St. Jude Medical's devices, their medical devices, and we're going to give you an exclusive license to their vulnerabilities that we found. Muddy Waters then, in turn, granted equity in their short position of St. Jude Medical. Both groups compiled the big report, and then they dropped their full disclosure in August 2016, saying that St. Jude Medical's medical devices had egregious security vulnerabilities. The stock price was going to, lose half their value. They're going to have to recall a ton of their devices. They went on a very well-coordinated media blitz, and the stock went down, 8%. So back to our 0 day in August 25th, 2016, when the report comes out. Remember, stock plummets 8%, ends up ending the day at only down 5%. A little bit about St. Jude Medical. So they're actually a very well-established company. They were formed in 1976. They're exclusively a medical device company, at least they started that way. And then their first device was an artificial heart valve. They since expanded into other medical devices, basically gobbling up other companies that produce different medical devices, ultimately becoming this pretty big medical device juggernaut. And in the midst of all this, when this all went down in 2016, they actually were in talks to be acquired by this company, Abbott Laboratories. And that whole acquisition was now in question. because there was an agreed upon price per share that Abbott Laboratories was agreeing to acquire St. Jude Medical, and now the stock drops, and the question is, is the stock going to recover? What's going to happen? Well, St. Jude Medical went on the offensive, and they ended up suing pretty much everyone. So they sued MedSec, the security researcher. They sued the CEO of MedSec, Justine Bone. They sued Carson Block, the founder of Muddy Waters. They sued Muddy Waters and basically said that they were suing for defamation. And I pulled all the data from the court records, the transcripts and stuff, and tore through all of it. Unfortunately, all I can find out is that not much happened when they sued in 2016 up until when they ended up settling. They basically were in a lot of arguments over discovery and what could Muddy Waters and MedSec get from St. Jude, what could St. Jude get from the hedge fund and the security researcher and the discovery process, and they ended up earlier this year settling. The terms were confidential, so I have no idea if money exchanged hands or what happened here, but it pretty much got brushed under the rug. As far as the fallout, St. Jude ended up recovering, so all their losses, they recovered them back. They didn't have the massive recall that was expected. That technically they did do a recall, but St. Jude Medical basically punted it to the hospitals and unfortunately the clinicians and said that, yeah, we're recalling your devices. You need to go to your doctor, and your doctor will do a firmware update on your pacemaker. And I don't think doctors are really going to, be interested in doing a firmware update or even have the knowledge to do that. So my guess is that probably no one went and did that, or very few people did. Abbott Technologies ended up finalizing their acquisition of St. Jude Medical, and pretty much nothing more bad happened to them. So, but what's interesting, and if we look at the cost per compromised record in the healthcare industry in particular here. So this is the Ponyman Institute. They've got every year they publish their cost of a data breach. And back in 2013, the healthcare sector overtook all the other sectors as the highest cost per compromised record. And this cost per compromised record is basically measured in terms of what's the cost of the organization to clean up? What's the PR work that you have to do? What's the reaching out to affected consumers or users? And what's the remediation costs? And in 2013, healthcare breaches in the healthcare sector, it was $233 per affected record. The report that came out this year, we've now way surpassed every other industry, and it's now $408 per record. So healthcare is number one, yay. Also in this report, they started publishing what is the mean time to identify and contain vulnerabilities. So what they do is they measure for companies that have a public vulnerability, how long was that vulnerability latent before anyone knew about it, and then how long did it take for the company to clean it up. And you can see here that healthcare is on the verge of overtaking the entertainment industry, where in the healthcare industry, the mean time to identify a vulnerability, so this is that latent vulnerability, is 255 days, and then to fix it, to remediate it, it's 103 days after that. So we're at 358 days, so almost a year. And we're closing in on the entertainment industry, so hopefully next year we'll be number one in there as well too. Well, something else that was interesting that I came across was that a research study was published earlier this year in March in the Harvard Business Law Review. And what researchers did is they wanted to analyze companies who had public vulnerabilities disclosed, and these are publicly traded companies who had public security vulnerabilities disclosed, and they wanted to look at their stock, both prior to the vulnerability as well as during and after the vulnerability. And they specifically looked at something called put options on stocks. So I talked about short selling earlier, but now I need to explain put options to you guys, which is very similar to short selling. So with put options, say we've got two actors here, we've got Bob and Charlie. Imagine that our Acme stock is trading for $100 a share, okay? So Bob is gonna pay Charlie some sort of fee, so some sort of small fee, say, and As part of this fee, Charlie is going to agree to buy 1 share of Acme stock for $100 by some agreed upon date. All right? Now, imagine the price